1A. Planet Football. Throughout history, people have played some version of a kicking game. What the world now calls football, or soccer in the U.S., began as far back as 2500 BC with the Chinese game of Zuchu. The sport we're familiar with today originated in Britain. By the 1840s, England's Football Association had established a set of rules, and the modern game was born. Today, more than 120 million regular players from all over the globe participate in the game annually, truly making soccer the world sport. Europe, home of the rich and famous. Europe has the largest number of soccer players on Earth, and is also home to the world's richest and best-known professional teams. Europe's major clubs, such as Spain's Real Madrid and England's Manchester United, have evolved from local teams to global brands, with supporters all over the world. Some are owned by foreign businessmen who invest large amounts of money in their clubs, hoping to earn significant returns on ticket sales, television, and advertising deals. Asia, a growing passion. Over the past 2 decades, an intense soccer competition among Japan, China, and South Korea has helped to increase enthusiasm for the sport across Asia. In China, for example, recent data suggests that soccer is now more popular than traditional Chinese favorites, such as table tennis and basketball. This enthusiasm has also helped to bridge differences and bring people together. The 2002 World Cup, co-hosted by South Korea and Japan, was a victory for cooperation and friendship. And in the Middle East, youth soccer teams have also helped to promote peace. Australia and Oceania. Soccer down under. For decades, Australian sports have been dominated by cricket, rugby, and Australian rules football. Today, this region still has the fewest number of soccer players and teams. But interest in soccer is growing, as immigrants from the Balkans and other countries bring the sport and their enthusiasm for it to their new country. The result? In 2006, Australia's national team, nicknamed the Socceroos, made its first appearance at the World Cup finals in 32 years. Africa. Soccer's new frontier. Africa has a number of talented players. However, the continent lacks strong domestic teams and faces the prospect of losing many of its best players to the European clubs. Several national teams have powerful athletes, though, and Africa's more prominent role in the soccer world was established in 2004 when FIFA awarded the 2010 World Cup tournament to South Africa. South America. Unbeatable talent. South America produces some of the most exciting soccer on earth, and many of the most admired players. Brazil has won the most World Cup finals ever, and is the only team to have participated in every World Cup to date. Youth soccer is also an enormous business in South America, third after Europe and North America. But as with Africa and Asia, many of the best players join the wealthy European teams for the chance to earn big money and international recognition. Almost 28% of the professional players are women, the largest number in the world. The Women's World Cup finals are a hugely popular event. One match held in Los Angeles drew a crowd of over 90,000, one of the largest ever for a women's sport. Men's soccer is also gaining in popularity throughout North America, despite tough competition from other popular team sports, such as baseball, American football, and, especially in Canada, ice hockey. Soccer. A global force. Thanks to its worldwide popularity and the reach of satellite television, soccer has experienced a major evolution in recent years. Today's major teams import both players and coaches from abroad, and clubs once supported only by their local communities now have fans all over the world. In the last quarter century, soccer has succeeded in cutting across national lines to become a global, interconnected sport, one that has the power to unite us all.
One B. What makes an Olympic champion? How does a person become an Olympic champion? someone capable of winning the gold. In reality, a combination of biological, environmental, and psychological factors, as well as training and practice, all go into making a super athlete. Perhaps the most important factor involved in becoming an elite athlete is genetics. Most Olympic competitors are equipped with certain physical characteristics that differentiate them from the average person. Take an elite athlete's muscles, for example. In most human skeletal muscles, the ones that make your body move, there are fast-twitch fibers and slow-twitch fibers. Fast-twitch fibers help us move quickly. Olympic weightlifters, for example, have a large number of fast-twitch fibers in their muscles, many more than the average person. These allow them to lift hundreds of kilos from the ground and over their heads in seconds. Surprisingly, a large muscular body is not the main requirement to do well in this sport. It is more important to have a large number of fast-twitch fibers in the muscles. The legs of an elite marathon runner, on the other hand, might contain up to 90% slow-twitch muscle fibers. These generate energy efficiently and enable an athlete to control fatigue and keep moving for a longer period of time. When we exercise long or hard, it's common to experience tiredness, muscle pain, and difficulty breathing. These feelings are caused when the muscles produce high amounts of lactate and can't remove it quickly enough. Athletes with many slow-twitch muscle fibers seem to be able to clear the lactate from their muscles faster as they move. Thus, the average runner might start to feel discomfort halfway into a race. A trained Olympic athlete, however, might not feel pain until much later in the competition. For some Olympic competitors, size is important. Most male champion swimmers are 180 centimeters, 6 feet or taller, allowing them to reach longer and swim faster. For both male and female gymnasts, though, a smaller size and body weight mean that they can move with greater ease and are less likely to suffer damage when landing on the floor from a height of up to 4.5 meters, 15 feet. Some athletes' abilities are naturally enhanced by their environment. Those raised at high altitudes in countries such as Kenya, Ethiopia, and Morocco have blood that is rich in hemoglobin. Large amounts of hemoglobin carry oxygen around the body faster, enabling these athletes to run better. Cultural factors also help some athletes do well at certain sports. Tegla Lerope, a young woman from northern Kenya, has won several marathons. She attributes some of her success to her country's altitude. She trains at about 2,400 meters or 8,000 feet, and some to her cultural background. As a child, she had to run 10 kilometers to school every day. I'd be punished if I was late, she says. Although genetics, environment, and even culture play a part in becoming an elite athlete, training and practice are needed to succeed. Marathon runners may be able to control fatigue and keep moving for long periods of time, but they must train to reach and maintain their goals. Weightlifters and gymnasts perfect their skills by repeating the same motions again and again until they are automatic. Greg Louganis, winner of 4 Olympic diving gold medals, says divers must train the same way to be successful. You have less than 3 seconds from takeoff until you hit the water, so it has to be reflex. You have to repeat the dives hundreds, maybe thousands of times. Training this way requires an athlete to be not only physically fit, but psychologically healthy as well. They have to be, says Sean McCann, a sports psychologist at the Olympic Training Center in the U.S. Otherwise, they couldn't handle the training loads we put on them. Athletes have to be good at setting goals, generating energy when they need it, and managing anxiety. How do athletes adjust to such intense pressure? Louganis explains how he learned to control his anxiety during a competition. Most divers think too much, he says. They're too much in their heads. What worked for me was humor. I remember thinking about what my mother would say if she saw me do a bad dive. She'd probably just compliment me on the beautiful splash.
2A. The Enigma of Beauty. The search for beauty spans centuries and continents. Paintings of Egyptians dating back over 4,000 years show both men and women painting their nails and wearing makeup. On the other side of the globe, the ancient Maya of Central America considered crossed eyes beautiful and hung little balls between children's eyes to develop this look. In 18th century France, wealthy noblemen wore large wigs of long white hair to make themselves attractive. In cultures throughout the world, people have gone to extreme lengths to achieve the goal of beauty. Today, people continue to devote a lot of time and money on their appearance. According to a recent report by the Nielsen Company, a global information and marketing corporation, 1 out of 3 consumers globally say they are spending more money today on beauty and healthcare products than ever before. Worldwide, sales of makeup, dieting, hair and skincare products, as well as gym memberships and cosmetic surgery, generate billions of dollars every year. And there is at least one good reason for the desire to be attractive. Beauty is power. Studies suggest that good-looking people make more money, get called on more often in class, and are perceived as friendlier. But what exactly is beauty? Trying to define it is difficult, and yet we know it when we see it, or so we think. Beauty is health, says one psychologist. It's a billboard saying, "I'm healthy. I can pass on your genes." And our awareness of it may start at a very early age. In one set of studies, 6-month-old babies were shown a series of photographs. The faces in the pictures had been rated for attractiveness by a group of college students. In the studies, the babies spent more time looking at the attractive faces than the unattractive ones. The idea that even babies judge appearance makes perfect sense to many researchers. In studies done by psychologists such as Victor Johnston at New Mexico State University and David Parrott at St. Andrews University in Scotland, men regularly showed a preference for women with certain features: larger eyes, fuller lips, and a smaller nose and chin. Another study suggests that women prefer men with large shoulders and a narrow waist. According to scientists, the mind unconsciously tells men and women that these traits, the full lips, clear skin, strong shoulders, equal health and genetic well-being. In other words, it's a fundamental part of human nature to look for these qualities in a mate. Not everyone agrees with this notion, however. Our hardwiredness can be altered by all sorts of expectations, predominantly cultural, says C. Loring Brace, an anthropologist at the University of Michigan. What is considered attractive in one culture might not be in another. Look in most Western fashion magazines, for example, and the women on the pages are thin. But is this the perfect body type for women worldwide? Douglas Yu, a biologist from Great Britain, and Glenn Shepard, an anthropologist at the University of California at Berkeley, say no. What is considered beautiful is subjective and varies around the world. Yu and Shepard found in one study, for example, that native peoples in southeast Peru preferred shapes regarded as overweight in Western cultures. Take another example. In every culture, one's hairstyle sends a clear message. In the Huli culture of Papua New Guinea, an island nation north of Australia, men grow their hair long as a symbol of health and strength. Teenage boys in this culture learn from a young age to style and decorate their hair, a behavior more commonly associated with the opposite gender in many cultures. It is also the men, not women in this culture, who are the objects of beauty. For certain festivals and celebrations, men dress up and paint their faces. The more colorful a man is, the more masculine and attractive he is considered. For better or worse, beauty plays a role in our lives. But it is extremely difficult to define exactly what makes one person attractive to another. Although there do seem to be certain physical traits that are considered universally appealing, it is also true that beauty does not always conform to a single, uniform standard. A person's cultural background, for example, may influence what he or she finds attractive in others. In the end, beauty really is, as the saying goes, in the eye of the beholder.
To be. Skin, the body's canvas. If you took off your skin and laid it flat, it would cover an area of about 1.9 square meters, 21 square feet, making it by far the body's largest organ. Covering almost the entire body, skin protects us from a variety of external forces, such as extremes of temperature, damaging sunlight, harmful chemicals, and dangerous infections. Skin is also packed with nerves, which keeps the brain in touch with the outside world. The health of our skin and its ability to perform its protective functions are crucial to our well-being. However, the appearance of our skin is equally, if not more, important to many people on this planet. Take skin color, for example. Your genes determine your skin's color, but for centuries humans have tried to lighten or darken their skin in an attempt to be more attractive. In the 1800s, white skin was desirable for many Europeans. Skin this color meant that its owner was a member of the upper class and did not have to work in the sun. Among darker-skinned people in some parts of the world, products used to lighten skin are still popular today. In other cultures during the 20th century, as cities grew and work moved indoors, attitudes towards light skin shifted in the opposite direction. Tanned skin began to indicate leisure time and health. In many places today, suntanning on the beach or in a salon remains popular, even though people are more aware of the dangers of UV rays. Just as people have altered their skin's color to denote wealth and beauty, so too have cultures around the globe marked their skin to indicate cultural identity or community status. Tattooing, for example, has been carried out for thousands of years. Leaders in places including ancient Egypt, Britain, and Peru wore tattoos to mark their status or their bravery. Today, among the Maori people of New Zealand, as well as in cultures in Samoa, Tahiti, and Borneo, full facial tattoos called moko are still used to identify the wearer as a member of a certain family and to symbolize the person's achievements in life. In Japan, tattooing has been practiced since around the 5th century BC. The government made tattooing illegal in 1870, and though there are no laws against it today, tattoos are still strongly associated with criminals, particularly the Yakuza or the Japanese mafia, who are known for their full-body tattoos. The complex design of a Yakuza member's tattoo usually includes symbols of character traits that the wearer wants to have. The process of getting a full-body tattoo is both slow and painful and can take up to 2 years to complete. In some cultures, scarring, a marking caused by cutting or burning the skin, is practiced, usually among people who have darker skin, on which a tattoo would be difficult to see. For many men in West Africa, for instance, scarring is a rite of passage, an act that symbolizes that a male has matured from a child into an adult. In Australia, among some native peoples, cuts are made on the skin of both men and women when they reach 16 or 17. Without these scars, members were traditionally not permitted to trade, sing ceremonial songs, or participate in other activities. Not all skin markings are permanent, though. In countries such as Morocco and India, women decorate their skin with colorful henna designs for celebrations, such as weddings and important religious holidays. The henna coloring, which comes from a plant, fades and disappears over time. In recent years, in many industrialized nations, tattooing, henna body art, and, to a lesser degree, scarring have been gaining in popularity. What makes these practices appealing to those living in modern cities? According to photographer Chris Rainier, whose book Ancient Marks examines body markings around the globe, people are looking for a connection with the traditional world. There is a whole sector of modern society, people in search of identity, people in search of meaning, says Rainier. Hence, there has been a huge explosion of tattooing and body marking. It's mankind wanting identity, wanting a sense of place and a sense of culture within their community.
(3A) Saving the Panda. July 9, 2005, was an important day at the Smithsonian National Zoological Park in Washington, D.C. The zoo had a new arrival that morning. Tai San, the first baby of Tian Tian and Mei Xiang, male and female giant pandas. Tai Shan's birth, like any pandas, was a cause for celebration. In the first 3 months that the cub was on public display following his birth, visits to the zoo increased by 50% over prior years. Around the world, conservation centers and zoos like the Smithsonian are working to ensure that pandas survive, whatever the cost. But what makes these animals so special? Aside from their cuteness, their scarcity makes them important. Giant pandas are extremely rare. Even other endangered animals, tigers, gorillas, Asian elephants, outnumber them, both in the wild and in captivity. Recently, China reported that about 1,590 of the black and white bears survive in the hills of Sichuan, Shanxi, and Guangsu provinces. In captivity, there are only about 200. Some are in the U.S., and a few others are in Mexico, Japan, Thailand, Germany, and Austria. Most captive pandas, though, are in zoos and research centers in their native China. Their shortage makes pandas precious, but caring for them isn't easy. The cost of hosting a giant panda at each zoo can exceed $2.5 million a year, and that's without babies. Add a couple of cubs, nearly half of all panda births produce twins, and the bill approaches $4 million. Of course, at any zoo, the arrival of a panda or the birth of cubs brings an increase in attendance, but the crowds rarely translate into sufficient revenue. Even with tickets and gift shop sales, no zoo has collected enough money to offset the costs of hosting one of these animals. Why is accommodating these bears so expensive? At most zoos, these animals get the best of everything: state-of-the-art habitats, the best doctors and keepers, the tastiest food, and a variety of toys to play with. In the U.S. alone, this level of care costs millions of dollars a year. Every year, each zoo also sends China $1 million for the protection of pandas and their remaining habitat. China uses these funds to create education programs for schools near protected areas and to restore the pandas' bamboo forests. Given the enormous cost of caring for these animals, what exactly are the benefits of raising pandas in captivity? For one thing, it has led to a number of successful births. In recent years, the captive panda population has increased dramatically. Record numbers of cubs have been born, with much better chances for survival rates. A decade ago, at the Hualong Nature Reserve in China, at least half the twins and many of the single cubs died as babies. Today, new care and feeding techniques have improved the chances for survival of captive pandas in zoos in China and around the globe. All those cubs have pushed the captive population closer to a magic number, 300. With that many pandas, says population biologist John Ballou, we can have a self-sustaining captive population and maintain 90% of known giant panda genetic variation for a century. With panda numbers now on the rise, China's goal is to release captive pandas into special nature reserves and to eventually boost the numbers of these animals in the wild. Scientists hesitate to do this just yet, though. As National Zoo biologist David Wilt says, there may be as many wild pandas out there now as the habitat can support. However, many pandas born in captivity are being trained to be more self-sufficient and not to rely on their human keepers. One day, we may be able to eliminate altogether the need to raise pandas in captivity. Though this hasn't happened yet, the work being done in China, the U.S., and other countries worldwide is helping to make the goal a reality, one panda at a time.
(3b) Tracking the snow leopard. When a snow leopard stalks its prey among the mountain walls, it moves softly, slowly, explains Indian biologist Raghunandan Singh Chundawat, who has studied the animal for years. If it knocks a stone loose, it will reach out a foot to stop it from falling and making noise. One might be moving right now, perfectly silent, maybe close by. But where? And how many are left to see? Best known for its spotted coat and long distinctive tail, the snow leopard is one of the world's most secretive animals. These elusive cats can only be found high in the remote mountainous regions of Central Asia. For this reason, and because they hunt primarily at night, they are very rarely seen. Snow leopards have been officially protected since 1975, but enforcing this law has proven difficult. Many continue to be killed for their fur and body parts, which are worth a fortune on the black market. In recent years, though, conflict with local herders has also led to a number of snow leopard deaths. This is because the big cats kill the herders' animals and drag the bodies away to eat, high up in the mountains. As a result of these pressures, the current snow leopard population is estimated at only 4,000 to 7,000, and some fear that the actual number may already have dropped below 3,500. The only way to reverse this trend and bring these cats back from near extinction, say conservationists, is to make them more valuable alive than dead. Because farming is difficult in Central Asia's cold, dry landscape, traditional cultures depend mostly on livestock, mainly sheep and goats, to survive in these mountainous regions. At night, when snow leopards hunt, herders' animals are in danger of snow leopard attacks. Losing only a few animals can push a family into desperate poverty. The wolf comes and kills, eats, and goes somewhere else, said one herder. But snow leopards are always around. They have killed 1 or 2 animals many times. Everybody wanted to finish this leopard. To address this problem, local religious leaders have called for an end to snow leopard killings, saying that these wild animals have the right to exist peacefully. They've also tried to convince people that the leopards are quite rare, and thus it is important to protect them. Financial incentives are also helping to slow snow leopard killings. The organization Snow Leopard Conservancy, India, has established Himalayan homestays, a program that sends visitors to the region to herders' houses. For a clean room and bed, meals with the family, and an introduction to their culture, visitors pay about $10 a night. Having guests once every 2 weeks through the tourist season provides the herders with enough income to replace the animals lost to snow leopards. In addition, homestays helps herders build protective fences that keep out snow leopards. The organization also conducts environmental classes at village schools and trains homestay members as nature guides, available for hire. In exchange, the herders agree not to kill snow leopards. In Mongolia, a project called Snow Leopard Enterprises, SLE, helps herder communities earn extra money in exchange for their promise to protect the endangered cat. Women in Mongolian herder communities make a variety of products: yarn for making clothes, decorative floor rugs, and toys using the wool from their herds. SLE buys these items from herding families and sells them abroad. Herders must agree to protect the snow leopards and to encourage neighbors to do the same. The arrangement increases herders' incomes by 10 to 15% and elevates the status of the women. If no one in the community kills the protected animals over the course of a year, the program members are rewarded with a 20% bonus in addition to the money they've already made. An independent review in 2006 found no snow leopard killings in areas where SLE operates. Today, the organization continues to add more communities. Projects like the Homestays program in India and SLE's business in Mongolia are doing well. Though they cover only a small part of the snow leopard's homeland, they make the leopards more valuable to more people each year, and in doing so, they help preserve this endangered animal.
For A. Sacred mountains. Volcanoes are both creators and destroyers. They can shape lands and cultures, but can also cause great destruction and loss of life. Two of the best-known examples are found at opposite ends of the world, separated by the Pacific Ring of Fire. Fuji, Japan's sacred summit. It's almost sunrise near the summit of Japan's Mount Fuji. Exhausted climbers, many of whom have hiked the 3,776 meters, 12,388 feet, through the night to reach this point, stop to watch as the sun begins its ascent, spreading its golden rays across the mountain. For everyone, this is an important moment. They have witnessed the dawn on Mount Fuji, the highest point in the land of the rising sun. Located in the center of Japan, Mount Fuji, whose name means without equal, is a sacred site. Japan's native religion, Shintoism, considers Fuji a holy place. Other people believe the mountain and its waters have the power to make a sick person well. For many, climbing Fuji is also a rite of passage. Some do it as part of a religious journey. For others, it is a test of strength. Whatever their reason, reaching the top in order to stand on Fuji's summit at sunrise is a must for many Japanese. And every July and August, almost 400,000 people attempt to do so. Fuji is more than a sacred site and tourist destination, however. It is also an active volcano around which 4 million people have settled and sits just 112 kilometers, 70 miles, from the crowded streets of Tokyo. The last time Fuji exploded, in 1707, it sent out a cloud of ash that covered the capital city and darkened the skies for weeks. Today, new data have some volcanologists concerned that Fuji may soon erupt again. According to Mato Ukawa and his associates at the National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention, there has been an increase in activity under Fuji recently, which may be caused by low-frequency earthquakes. Understanding what causes these quakes may help scientists predict when Fuji, the biggest of Japan's 86 active volcanoes, will come back to life. In the meantime, locals living near Fuji hold special festivals each year to offer gifts to the goddess of the volcano, as they have for generations, so that she will not erupt and destroy the land and its people below. Popocatépetl, Mexico's smoking mountain. Halfway across the globe from Fuji, Popocatépetl, one of the world's tallest and most dangerous active volcanoes, stands just 60 kilometers, 37 miles southeast of Mexico City. Although the volcano, whose name means smoking mountain, has erupted many times over the centuries, scientists believe its last great explosion occurred around 820 AD. In recent years, however, El Popo, as Mexicans call the mountain, has been threatening to explode once more. In December 2000, almost 26,000 people were evacuated when El Popo started to send out ash and smoke. As with all active volcanoes, the question is not if it will erupt again. An eruption is inevitable. The question is when it will happen. Every volcano works in a different way, explains Carlos Valdez Gonzalez, a scientist who monitors El Popo. What we're trying to learn here are the symptoms signaling that El Popo will erupt. These include earthquakes or any sign that the mountain surface is changing or expanding. The hope is that scientists will be able to warn people in the surrounding areas so they have enough time to escape. A powerful eruption could displace over 20 million people whose lives would be saved if the warning is delivered early enough. For many people living near El Popo, especially the farmers, abandoning their land is unthinkable. As anyone who farms near a volcano knows, the world's richest soils are volcanic. They produce bananas and coffee in Central America, fine wines in California, and enormous amounts of rice in Indonesia. For this reason, people will stay on their land even if they face danger. Today, many people who live near El Popo continue to see the mountain as their ancestors did. According to ancient beliefs, a volcano can be a god, a mountain, and a human all at the same time. To appease El Popo and to ensure rain and a good harvest, locals begin a cycle of ceremonies that start in March and end in August. Carrying food and gifts for the volcano, they hike up the mountain. Near the summit, they present their offerings, asking the volcano to protect and provide for one more season.
4B. Predicting Earthquakes. Never before have so many people packed into cities, places such as Los Angeles, Istanbul, Tokyo, and Lima, that are regularly affected by earthquakes. Located near the edge of Earth's huge shifting plates, these cities face the risk of death and economic disaster from large quakes, and from the tsunamis, fires, and other destruction they often cause. We understand earthquakes better than we did a century ago. Now scientists would like to predict them. But is this possible? Today, some of the simplest questions about earthquakes are still difficult to answer. Why do they start? What makes them stop? Perhaps the most important question scientists need to answer is this: are there clear patterns in earthquakes, or are they basically random and impossible to predict? In Japan, government scientists say they have an answer to the question. We believe that earthquake prediction is possible, says Koshim Yamaoka, a scientist at the Earthquake Research Institute at the University of Tokyo. Earthquakes follow a pattern. They have observable signs, Yamaoka believes. In fact, Japan has already predicted where its next great earthquake will be: Tokai, a region along the Pacific coast about 161 kilometers, 100 miles, southwest of Tokyo. Here, two plate boundaries have generated huge earthquakes every 100 to 150 years. But the section along Tokai hasn't had a major quake since 1854. The theory is that strain is building up in this region, and that it's time for this zone to reduce its stress. Unfortunately, this is more a forecast than a prediction. It's one thing to say that an earthquake is likely to happen in a high-risk area. It's another to predict exactly where and when the quake will occur. The desire for a precise prediction of time and place has led to another theory, the idea of pre-slip. Naoki Kato, a scientist at the Earthquake Research Institute, says his laboratory experiments show that before a fault in the Earth's crust finally breaks and causes an earthquake, it slips just a little. If we can detect these early slips taking place deep in the Earth's crust, we may be able to predict the next big quake. Scientists working in Parkfield, California in the U.S. are also trying to see if predicting earthquakes is possible. They've chosen the town of Parkfield not only because the San Andreas Fault runs through it, but because it's known for having earthquakes quite regularly, approximately every 22 years. In the late 1980s, scientists in Parkfield decided to study the fault to see if there were any warning signs prior to a quake. To do this, they drilled deep into the fault and set up equipment to register activity. Then they waited for the quake. Year after year, nothing happened. When a quake did finally hit on September 28, 2004, it was years off schedule. But most disappointing were the lack of warning signs. Scientists reviewed the data but could find no evidence of anything unusual preceding the September 28th quake. It led many to believe that perhaps earthquakes really are random events. Instead of giving up, though, scientists in Parkfield dug deeper into the ground. By late summer 2005, they had reached the fault's final depth of 3 kilometers, 2 miles, where they continued collecting data, hoping to find a clue. And then they found something. In an article published in the July 2008 journal Nature, the researchers in Parkfield claimed to have detected small changes in the fault shortly before an earthquake hit. What had they noticed? Just before a quake, the cracks in the fault had widened slightly. Scientists registered the first changes 10 hours before a 3.0 quake hit. They identified identical signs 2 hours before a 1.0 quake, demonstrating that perhaps the pre-slip theory is correct. In other words, it may in fact be possible to predict an earthquake. Although there is still a long way to go, it appears from the research being done all over the world that earthquakes are not entirely random. If this is so, in the future we may be able to track the Earth's movements and design early warning systems that allow us to predict when a quake will happen and, in doing so, prevent the loss of life. (5a) The Perfect Beach. In pursuit of the perfect beach, travel writer Stanley Stewart heads to Brazil, where he discovers some of the world's most beautiful sandy escapes.
I'm standing on Rio de Janeiro's Copacabana Beach, one of Brazil's and the world's most famous stretches of sand. As I watch life go by here in all its varied forms, I've come to realize that any understanding of Brazil really begins on its beaches. In this vibrant, multicultural country, the beach is not just a place. It's a state of mind, a way of thinking and living. Rio alone, I'm told, has over 70 beaches, each with its own community. Some are for bodybuilders, others are for senior citizens, still others are popular with parents and children. But Rio's beaches are just the starting point for my exploration of Brazil's Atlantic coastline, which at more than 8,000 kilometers, 5,000 miles, and with more than 2,000 beaches, is the longest in the world. Every Brazilian has his or her own ideas of the perfect beach and is eager to tell you where to find it. I'm happy to take people's advice, but my ultimate goal is to find my own dream beach. I head to a place said to have some of Brazil's best coastline, the state of Bahia in the northeast. Portuguese settlers established themselves at Bahia's present-day capital, Salvador da Bahia, in 1549. Over the centuries, people of many races have arrived and intermarried here, creating a distinctive cultural mix which influences Bahia's language, religion, cuisine, music, and dance. I'd been told that one of Bahia's best beaches, Prainha, lies just south of Salvador, near the town of Itacaré. On arriving at Prainha's beach, I discover its golden sand lined by a row of perfect palm trees, moving softly in the ocean breeze. Under the moon, silver waves roll onto the sand. As I enter the water, I have the feeling of swimming through moonlight. Prainha's beauty is magnificent. Its perfect curves and graceful lines are like something you might see in a postcard. But for me, it's a little too perfect. The beach I'm searching for needs to be a little wilder. I continue my search, heading north to one of Brazil's legendary beaches, Jericoacoara. 20 years ago, only a handful of people were living in Jeri. Today, it's an international destination, considered one of the best beach hangouts in the world, especially if you like windsurfing. It attracts visitors from Tokyo to Toronto and has grown from a small village into a lively little town. Despite the changes, Jeri hasn't been spoiled by tourists, mostly because of its isolated location. It's at least 5 hours from any airport. Everyone in Jeri rents a beach buggy, which comes with a driver. I tell my driver to take me as far along the coast as he can. We drive for 3 hours, finally arriving at Maceió, a fisherman's beach. Boats lie on their sides while nets hang out to dry on lines between fishermen's houses. We eat on the beach and later rest in hammocks near the table. It's a great day on an amazing beach. How can it possibly get any better, I wonder? But I have one final place to visit. Of the many beach destinations in this country, there is one that all Brazilians hold in high regard: the islands of Fernando de Noronha. More than a dozen beautiful beaches ring the island of Fernando alone, 3 of which rank among the top 10 in Brazil. The islands of Fernando de Noronha lie a few hundred kilometers out in the Atlantic. For years, people were prohibited from visiting these islands because they were used as a prison and later by the army. Today, the islands are a national park and UNESCO World Heritage Site, rich with diverse bird and sea life. I visit a number of beaches on Fernando, but I leave the best one for last. The beach at Praia do Leo is the perfect balance of sand, sea, and sky. The water is pale blue and warm, alive with colorful fish, turtles, and other marine life. The sand is the color of honey. And in the rock formations and strong winds that occasionally come in from the Atlantic, there is that hint of wildness I was seeking. Finally, I found the beach of my dreams. I dig my toes in the sand deeply, and imagine I can hold on to this place forever.
Five B. Land of Fire and Ice. Never mind its chilly name. As a travel destination, Iceland is hot. Located in the North Atlantic Ocean, Iceland is Europe's westernmost country, with the most northerly capital city in the world. Viking explorers migrated here from northern Europe in 930 AD, when they established the world's first parliament. The country's national language can still be traced to the one spoken by the Vikings over 1,000 years ago. Today, Iceland has a population of just over 310,000, spread over 100,000 square kilometers, about 40,000 square miles. Despite its small size, there are many reasons to visit this remarkable country. City of Culture. Most visitors' first port of call is the country's capital, Reykjavik, a small and clean city known for its colorful and stylish architecture. The city's downtown area is lined with shops, art galleries, cafes, and bookstores. In 2000, Reykjavik was awarded the title of Europe's City of Culture, thanks to its impressive art and museum scenes and lively nightlife. The good news for visitors is that Iceland's temperatures are fairly mild, even in the winter, when they stay at around 4 degrees, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. During winter months, nights are long and the northern lights become visible, lighting up the night sky with a spectacular natural display. In summer, the country gets almost 22 hours of daylight, and native Icelanders and visitors alike enjoy partying outdoors until dawn. Hot springs. Iceland is one of the most volcanically active nations in the world, and there are a number of thermal, hot water, springs around the island. All are heated naturally by underground volcanic activity. In fact, Iceland converts energy generated by these springs into electricity, which powers and heats people's homes and businesses. As a result, Iceland burns very little fossil fuel, such as oil and gas, and has some of the cleanest air in the world. One of Iceland's most popular hot springs is the Blue Lagoon, a huge lake of bright blue seawater just outside Reykjavik. Surrounded by volcanoes and lava fields, the Blue Lagoon receives more than 300,000 visitors a year. After a long day's sightseeing or a long night of partying, visitors can relax their muscles and release their tension in the lagoon's steaming hot water, which has an average temperature of about 38 degrees, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Some believe the waters are able to cure certain illnesses and improve skin quality. Caves and monsters. Most of the inner part of Iceland is uninhabited and accessible only by truck or other vehicle. Nevertheless, there is a range of outdoor activities to enjoy elsewhere in the country, particularly along the coasts. Iceland is an adventure, says Sol Squire, whose Icelandic company organizes adventure trips around the country. We have Europe's biggest glaciers, active volcanoes, cave explorations, and skiing. One of Iceland's most popular attractions is caving. Exploring Iceland's unusual lava caves, most of which formed more than 10,000 years ago, requires only basic caving knowledge and equipment. Ice caves, however, are more challenging and require special clothes and hiking tools. The best-known ice caves are in Vatnajökull, a vast layer of ice, which at 4,828 square kilometers, 3,000 square miles, is Iceland's and Europe's largest glacier. It also happens to be situated just above an active volcano. If exploring caves and glaciers doesn't interest you, head south, just outside the town of Vik, to check out the huge rock formations that were once believed to be monsters turned into stone. These are a dramatic part of the scenery on one of Iceland's most impressive black sand beaches, the Golden Circle. And finally, No trip to Iceland would be complete without a visit to the Golden Circle, a pathway northeast of Reykjavik that connects Gullfoss, a huge golden waterfall, the hot springs region of Geysir, and Thingvellir National Park. The mid-Atlantic fault that runs through Iceland is literally pulling the island apart. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Thingvellir Valley, where the land is actually separating and the stony ground beneath your feet frequently shifts. Hold on while you hike.
(6a) The Secrets of Stonehenge. All over the globe are historical mysteries left to us by the ancient world, lost civilizations, abandoned cities, and puzzling monuments. One unexplained mystery that has both inspired and mystified modern man for centuries is Stonehenge. Though it is one of the best-known artifacts in the world, we have no definitive idea of why it was built and what it was actually used for. Today, however, two new investigations may offer some answers. A place of the dead? The first theory begins with findings being unearthed not at Stonehenge, but at a location nearby. Archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson and his colleagues have been studying an area about 3 kilometers, 2 miles, northeast of Stonehenge. Here stands Durrington Walls, a structure similar to Stonehenge, but about 20 times larger. In and around Durrington Walls were 3 circular structures made of wood. Evidence suggests that these wooden circles were holy places, or perhaps the residences of important officials who cared for Durrington. Outside Durrington Walls, Parker Pearson and his colleagues have also recently discovered a village of up to 300 houses which date back more than 4,500 years. What do the findings at Durrington Walls have to do with Stonehenge? Parker Pearson believes there is a connection between the two places, and he cites his recent studies of the Malagasy culture in Madagascar to help explain his theory. In Malagasy culture, stone is a symbol of hardened bones and death. Wood, in contrast, is associated with life. Using this model, Parker Pearson sees associations between the wooden structures of Durrington and the hard monument of Stonehenge. Durrington, in this new theory, is the domain of the living, while Stonehenge is a place of the dead. Parker Pearson goes on to explain that the houses near Durrington Walls were probably occupied at certain times of the year when people gathered for the summer and winter solstices, the longest and shortest days of the year, to celebrate certain religious ceremonies. And in fact, large amounts of pottery and animal bones have been found near Durrington, suggesting that this site was used as a place for eating and drinking. In contrast, very little pottery has been found at Stonehenge. In addition, almost no human remains have been found at Durrington, but a number of graves have been uncovered at Stonehenge. Paths from Stonehenge and Durrington Walls to the nearby river Avon also suggest that the two sites were linked. At certain times of the year, most of the dead would have been carried down the road from Durrington and put in the river. Later, remains of the society's rulers would have been brought down the river, carried up the long avenue, and deposited at Stonehenge. A place for health and healing? In Wales, about 400 kilometers, 250 miles east of Stonehenge, archaeologists have another theory about why the monument was built and what it was used for. In this region of Wales are the Preseli Mountains. Archaeologists have traced the origin of Stonehenge's oldest stones, often referred to as blue stones because of their appearance when wet, to this site. One question that has puzzled archaeologists for years is why did ancient Britons transport these huge stones, which weighed up to 3,600 kilos, 4 tons, and use them to build Stonehenge? Some archaeologists believe that early people saw the Preseli Hills with their giant blue stones as a holy place. There is also a local belief, which is still common today, that the waters coming from the Preseli Mountains can cure illness. It is possible that the motive for moving these stones the great distance to the Salisbury Plain was to create a center for health and healing. How exactly the stones were transported, without the use of wheels, remains a mystery. Perhaps they were pulled by teams of men and animals or moved on giant rollers of wood. However it was done, Transporting such enormous stones was a remarkable achievement for the time. Stonehenge was one of the last great monuments built in ancient England. It was abandoned about 3,500 years ago, and because its creators wrote no texts to explain it, they have left us forever with one of history's great puzzles to solve.
(6b) The People That Time Forgot. While excavating a cave on the Indonesian island of Flores, archaeologists made an astonishing and unexpected find, a very unusual human skeleton. "At first we thought it was a child," says Mike Morwood, one of the archaeologists involved in the project. The remains were definitely human, but the body was only about 1 meter, 3 feet, long, about the size of a modern 3-year-old. The team transported the skeleton back to Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, for closer inspection. There, Peter Brown, an anthropologist from the University of New England in Australia, analyzed the skeleton. He determined that the human was a female, and contrary to what archaeologists first thought, that she was an adult, not a child. Additional studies also showed that she had lived about 18,000 years ago, the same time that modern humans, Homo sapiens, were walking the earth. Her forehead and jaw were similar to those of an earlier type of human, Homo erectus, but her size was unique, unlike any other human archaeologists had ever seen. But it wasn't just her height and weight that made her unusual. She also had a very small brain, about a third of a modern human's, even smaller than a chimpanzee's. Perhaps scientists suggested this was a modern human who had suffered from a rare disease, which caused her body to develop abnormally. But when archaeologists returned to the cave where they had made their original discovery, they unearthed several other adult skeletons. All shared the same characteristics as the first female. Scientists began to realize that an entire population of tiny beings had once lived on Flores. Had they discovered a new species of modern human? Immediately, scientists had a number of questions about these people, which they now called Homo Floresiensis. One of the first was, where did this species come from? According to Peter Brown, these little people who lived on Flores from about 95,000 until at least 13,000 years ago may have evolved from a population of Homo erectus, which crossed from Asia to Indonesia at least 1.5 million years ago. But how could those early humans have reached the remote island of Flores? Located between mainland Asia and Australia, Flores was never connected by land bridges to either continent. Even when the sea level was low, traveling to Flores involved sea crossings of up to 24 kilometers, 15 miles. People could only have reached Flores if they had the brain power to design and sail boats. Scientists had believed that Homo erectus had a fairly limited intelligence. But with these new findings, they are now asking whether Homo erectus was smarter than first thought. Which raises another question. Homo erectus was probably several centimeters taller than Homo floresiensis. What caused the change in size? Scientists believe thousands of years of isolation on Flores could have caused the people to shrink, especially if they had no natural predators, which would make physical size and strength less important. In addition, having a larger body requires more food, and on Flores, resources were scarce. Minimizing food consumption and adapting in size were necessary for Homo floresiensis to survive, a phenomenon often seen in nature. Despite their smaller brains, the little people were apparently skilled tool makers and clever hunters. Near the spot where archaeologists found the bones of Homo floresiensis, they also unearthed pointed stone tools and the remains of a stegodont, an extinct relative of the elephant, which could weigh 400 kilos, 800 pounds. The stone tools were probably used to hunt animals that were many times larger than the little people. There is no sign of modern humans on Flores before 11,000 years ago. Nevertheless, it is possible that people like us, who were already living in Australia and parts of Asia 40,000 years ago, met their tiny human cousins. Some scientists have suggested that a conflict between the two human species may have caused Homo Floresiensis to die out. More likely, though, is that the tiny humans became extinct as a result of a major volcanic eruption. Today, though, local stories are still told about little people who once walked the island. It's amazing to think that modern humans may still have a memory of sharing the planet with another species of human, one who was like us, but also very different.
(7a) Caffeine. It's 1:45 a.m., and 21-year-old Thomas Murphy is burning the midnight oil, studying for an important engineering exam he has at 2 in the afternoon later today. To stay awake and focused, he's had 2 cups of coffee in the last 3 hours, and is now downing a popular energy drink, one that has 2 to 3 times the amount of caffeine as a similar-sized can of soda. Many students like Murphy, as well as marathon runners, airline pilots, and long-distance travelers, owe their energy and sometimes their efficiency to one of mankind's oldest stimulants, caffeine. Many say they couldn't live without it. The power to counter physical fatigue and increase alertness is part of the reason caffeine ranks as the world's most popular mood-altering drug. It is found not only in sodas, energy drinks, coffee, and tea, but also in diet pills, pain relievers like aspirin, and chocolate bars. Many societies around the world have also created entire rituals around the use of caffeine. Afternoon tea in the UK, the café culture of France, tea ceremony in Japan, and the morning cup of coffee or tea that in many cultures marks the start of the day. Caffeine is in many of the foods or drinks we consume, but is it really good for us? Charles Czeisler, a scientist and sleep expert at Harvard Medical School, believes that caffeine causes us to lose sleep, which he says is unhealthy. Without adequate sleep, the typical 8 hours, the human body will not function at its best physically, mentally, or emotionally. Too often, Czeisler says, we consume caffeine to stay awake, which later makes it impossible for us to get the rest we need. Health risks have also been tied to caffeine consumption. Over the years, studies have attributed higher rates of certain types of cancer and bone disease to caffeine consumption. To date, however, there is no definitive proof that caffeine actually causes these diseases. A number of scientists, including Roland Griffiths, a professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in the U.S., believe that regular caffeine use causes physical dependence. Heavy caffeine users, Griffiths says, exhibit similar behaviors. Their moods fluctuate from high to low. They get mild to severe headaches, or they feel tired or sad when they can't have a coffee, soft drink, energy drink, or cup of tea. To minimize or stop these feelings, users must consume caffeine, a behavior Griffith says that is characteristic of drug addiction. Despite these concerns, the general opinion in the scientific community is that caffeine is not dangerous when consumed moderately. For example, by having 1 or 2 small cups of coffee, about 300 milligrams of caffeine per day. Furthermore, a lot of current research contradicts long-held negative beliefs about caffeine and suggests that it may, in fact, have health benefits. For instance, studies have shown that caffeine can help ease pain by reducing muscle inflammation. Because it is a stimulant, caffeine can also help improve one's mood. Research has also shown that some caffeinated drinks, specifically certain teas, have disease-fighting chemicals that can help the body fight a number of illnesses, including certain types of cancer. In addition, as a type of mental stimulant, caffeine increases alertness, memory, and reaction speed. Because it fights fatigue, it facilitates performance on tasks like driving, flying, and solving simple math problems. And while it is true that caffeine can increase blood pressure, the effect is usually temporary, and therefore not likely to cause heart trouble, especially if caffeine is consumed in moderation. and despite its nearly universal use, caffeine has rarely been abused. With caffeine, overuse tends to stop itself, says Jack Bergman, a specialist at Harvard Medical School. If you consume too much, you get uncomfortable and you don't want to continue. Caffeine's behavioral effects are real, but most often mild. Getting that burst of energy, of course, is why many of the most popular drinks on earth contain caffeine. Whether it's a student drinking coffee before class or a businessman enjoying tea with lunch, mankind's favorite stimulant is at work every day, all over the world.
Seven B. Powering the future. Despite modern society's heavy dependence on fossil fuels for energy, most people are aware that the supply of these fuels is finite. As oil, in particular, becomes more costly and difficult to find, researchers are looking at alternative energy sources, including solar, wind, and even nuclear power. But which substitute, if any, is the right one? Solar. Solar panels catch energy directly from the sun and convert it into electricity. One of the world's largest solar power stations is located near Leipzig, Germany, where more than 33,000 solar panels generate enough energy to power about 1,800 homes. But unlike the burning of fossil fuels, the process used to create all that solar energy produces no emissions. Today, however, solar provides less than 1% of the world's energy, primarily because the cost of the panels is still very high. And price is only one issue. Clouds and darkness also cause solar panels to produce less energy, which requires one to have additional power sources, such as batteries, available. Some scientists think the solution to this problem can be found in space, which they say is the ideal place to gather energy from the sun. With no clouds and no nighttime, a space-based solar power station could operate constantly. These stations would send the power back to Earth, which could then be turned into electricity for consumption. Advocates of solar space stations say this technology would require a lot of money initially, but eventually it could provide continuous clean energy that would be cheaper than other fuels. Also, unlike other energy sources, solar power from space will last as long as the sun shines and will be able to guarantee everyone on Earth all the energy they need. Wind. Wind, the fastest growing alternative energy source, is another way of collecting energy from the sun. Unlike solar power, however, it works well on cloudy days. All over Europe, incentives designed to decrease the dependence on oil and coal have led to a steep increase in wind-powered energy. Today, Europe leads the world in wind power, with almost 35,000 megawatts, the equivalent of 35 large coal-powered plants. North America remains a distant second, with just over 7,000 megawatts. Despite its successes, some oppose wind power development, saying the turbines are both noisy and ugly. Just outside England's Lake District, a protected national park, 27 wind towers are planned, each about 40 meters, 130 feet tall. Many locals are protesting. This is a high-quality landscape, says one local homeowner. They shouldn't be putting those things in here. There are other challenges, too. If the wind doesn't blow, the turbines don't have the capacity to produce sufficient energy. As a result, other power sources are needed. In contrast, a strong wind can create too much power. In cases like this, the energy company must sell the extra power at a much reduced rate, which is not good for business. What's needed for both wind and solar is a way to store a large energy surplus so that it can later be turned into electricity. However, most systems are still decades away from making this a reality. On the plus side, both wind and solar enable people to generate their own energy where they live. People can have their own windmills or solar panels with batteries for calm days. Nuclear. In the 1970s, nuclear was the energy alternative. Nuclear power produces vast amounts of electricity more cheaply than gas or coal, with no carbon emissions. For a number of years in the 1980s and 90s, however, use of nuclear power declined due to accidents, concerns about nuclear waste storage and disposal, and high construction costs. Today, though, times are changing. Worldwide, about 440 plants now generate 16% of the planet's electric power, and some countries have invested heavily in nuclear energy. France, for instance, gets 78% of its electricity from nuclear power. China has started to build 1 or 2 new plants a year, and Japan and India have also begun to utilize nuclear energy on a large scale. Though there are still concerns about the safety of nuclear power, many now believe it may be one of the future's greenest energy alternatives. In the end, are any of these sources alone the answer to our current energy problems? The short answer is no. But used in some combination along with other power sources, we may find ways to reduce and eventually eliminate our dependence on fossil fuels.
8A. Zheng He and the Chinese Armada. 600 years ago, China's Admiral Zheng He led a powerful fleet of trading ships on 7 voyages that changed China and many parts of the world forever. On each of his journeys, Zheng commanded more than 300 ships of 30,000 sailors, accompanied as well by hundreds of government officials, doctors, cooks, merchants, and interpreters. The fleet accumulated knowledge and wealth and spread Chinese influence all across Asia to Africa. And yet today, Zheng He, one of the world's greatest explorers, is scarcely known in many places around the world. Born into a Muslim family in 1371 and given the name Maher at birth, Ma is the Chinese translation of the name Muhammad, Zheng He was captured as a young boy by the Chinese army. By the time he was 31 in 1402, Maher had become one of the military's most powerful soldiers and an advisor to China's leader, who gave him a new name, Zheng He, and an important new job, Admiral of China's Imperial Navy. In the summer of 1405, Zheng He departed on the first of his 7 voyages from the city of Nanjing, then the capital of China. His goal was to mix exploration with business and diplomacy, and to that end, he carried Chinese silk, coins, and other goods to be exchanged for foreign commodities such as spices, animals, cloth, and other products. By the end of 1405, Zheng He's fleet had arrived in present-day Vietnam. Later, he traveled to the islands of Java and Sumatra in Indonesia, and then west toward India via Sri Lanka. On subsequent voyages, Zheng He's ships traveled further west to places such as Iran, Oman, and Yemen, and ultimately to the eastern coast of Africa. By the end of his last voyage, 28 years later, Zheng He had established major trading centers at ports all along the way, and China was importing and exporting goods in ports from East Asia to Africa. Throughout their travels, Zheng He and his men were introduced to different foods, languages, customs, architecture, and scientific and religious beliefs. "How can there be such diversity in the world?" said one of the Admiral's men at one point. Though he was constantly faced with the unfamiliar, Zheng He was fascinated by the cultures he visited, and he spoke often of the need to treat distant people with kindness. In addition to promoting trade and diplomacy, Zheng He's 7 voyages also resulted in the spread of Chinese people and culture throughout Asia and beyond. Malaysia and Indonesia, for example, had important ports that Zheng He's fleet returned to often. Eventually, thousands of Chinese migrated to and settled in these places and maintain a strong presence there today. In a later voyage to eastern Africa, legend says that some of Zheng He's ships were caught in a storm and sank. The men swam to an island off the coast of Kenya, where they ultimately married local women and had children. Their descendants in Africa are said to have Asian features and family names such as Famau and Wei. The end of Zheng He's sixth voyage in 1422 coincided with the new emperor coming to power. The country's new leader wanted to terminate all foreign exploration and to focus on China only. This reversal changed history and stopped short what might have been a very different future for Asia and the world, says Professor Liu Yingsheng of Nanjing University. As China ended foreign exploration, European powers such as Spain and England rose to take its place, and by 1492, Columbus had arrived in the Americas. Before his fleet was grounded forever, though, Zheng He's armada made one final voyage in 1431, back to Africa's east coast. Along the way, the Admiral, a lifelong Muslim, also made a personal visit to Mecca, Islam's most holy site. On the return journey to China in 1433, Zheng He died, and it is believed that he was buried at sea just off India's southwestern coast. Over 600 years after his first voyage, Zheng He's legacy lives on. Mosques in Indonesia are named after him. In some places in Southeast Asia, he is considered a god, and there are festivals that celebrate his life. Perhaps most important, says scholar Roderick Patak, is that today, China is again engaging the world, and Zheng is a symbol of that opening.
(8b) The Travels of Sinbad. Explorer Tim Severin steps back 1,000 years to recreate Sinbad's legendary voyages. The selections below detail Severin's adventure.
An idea forms. To recreate Sinbad's voyages, I'll need to research, design, and build an early medieval Arab ship and use it to sail from the Persian Gulf to China. Searching for more data about traditional Arab ships, I visit the country of Oman, which has a long history of shipbuilding. I am welcomed to Muscat, the country's capital, by the Minister of National Culture, who tells me that Oman will pay for the entire project, the ship, the crew, the voyage, all on behalf of the Omani people and the Arab world. The voyage begins. With a team comprised of 17 Omanis and 10 Westerners, our ship Sohar departs Muscat on November 23rd and heads east into the Arabian Sea toward India. By December, we reach India's coast, and after a short stay, we sail to Sri Lanka, or Serendib, as early Arabs called it. The name has given us the word serendipity, meaning a lucky chance in English, and it's easy to see why early visitors to this beautiful island gave it this name. On his second voyage, Sinbad was carried by a giant bird to the Valley of the Diamonds, a place possibly in Sri Lanka, a country famous for its precious gems. Later, during his sixth voyage, Sinbad claimed Serendib's king held magnificent parades during which huge, decorated elephants marched in the streets. In fact, what visitors to Sri Lanka may have seen during Sinbad's time, and can still see today, was Parahera, a parade held every year in which people and elephants dressed colorfully marched through the streets to honor the Buddha. Adrift at sea. In early February, we depart Sri Lanka, hoping to catch strong winds that will carry us eastward toward the Indonesian island of Sumatra. The winds are light, however, and after 3 weeks at sea, we are still 1,127 kilometers, 700 miles away. I begin to worry about our fresh water and food supplies. And then we get lucky. In early March, a storm passes over and we catch fresh water. About a week later, the crew also catches 17 sharks and replenishes the food supply. The land of gold. On April 5th, 2 months after leaving Sri Lanka, the winds accelerate and we make progress. Finally, by April 18th, we reach Sumatra, known during Sinbad's time as the Land of Gold, a place of great wealth and beauty, but also believed to be home to terrible dangers. Here, during his fourth voyage, Sinbad's crew met island natives who fed them food that made them sleepy. Once drugged, the crew was to become part of the natives' dinner menu. Fortunately, Sinbad refused to take the food, and as a result, was able to escape before he could be eaten. Hashish, A drug derived from a plant and used in northern Sumatra as a flavoring in food may have been the source for this story. While visiting Sumatra again during his 5th voyage, Sinbad was captured this time in a forest by a short, old man with dark skin and red hair who could not talk. Sinbad called this strange person the Old Man of the Sea. More likely, it was the great ape of Sumatra, the orangutan, a highly intelligent animal who is a close relative of humans and is now an endangered species in the forests of Indonesia. Stormy weather. After a brief stay in Sumatra, we sail quickly to Singapore, and then on to our final destination, Guangzhou, China. In the South China Sea, we are hit by a violent storm. Our mainsail is broken, and as the crew struggles to repair the damaged sail, the ship nearly capsizes. During his 6th voyage, Sinbad spoke of the terrible weather in this region, and for the next 5 days, Sohar is hit regularly by storms. The weather finally improves, and by July 11th, we reach the port of Guangzhou. We have been at sea for 7.5 months and have covered 9,656 kilometers, 6,000 miles. Our Chinese hosts treat us to a huge celebration, though at one point I can't help but feel sad. We have traced Sinbad's route, and now our great adventure is ending. But inside me, there is happiness too. The generosity of the Omani people and the determination of the men who built and sailed Sohar made the voyage a reality. Now this journey, like Sinbad's 7 voyages, will become another tale to be told. (9A) Survival in the Andes. On Friday, October 13, 1972, a small plane flying from Uruguay to Chile with 45 people on board accidentally flew too low and crashed into a mountain in the Andes. How some of the passengers managed to live is one of the greatest survival stories ever told. 13 people died in the impact, and in the weeks that followed, 16 more would as well, including 8 who were killed by an avalanche. The survivors were dressed only in street clothes and had no supplies that would allow them to endure the mountain's temperatures, which at night, at an altitude of 3,600 meters, 12,000 feet, sometimes dropped to 30 degrees below zero. The survivors stayed inside the remains of the aircraft using thin seat covers for blankets and waited for a rescue that never came. Days turned into weeks. It was urgent, the survivors knew, to find a way to escape before others died. 3 of the passengers, Robert Canessa, Nando Parado, and Antonio Vicentin, volunteered to journey through the mountains to search for help. On the day of their departure, each man wore similar clothes, 3 pairs of socks, a plastic bag around each foot to keep the water out, boots, 4 pairs of pants, and 4 sweaters. Many of the clothes came from those who had died in the crash. The escape team also carried a crucial piece of survival equipment, a sleeping bag they had made and sewn together using wire from the plane. As they departed the crash site, the 3 men promised the remaining survivors that they would survive and bring back help. And so their journey began. For part of the first day, they made steady progress, thanks to mild weather. But none of the young men had mountain climbing experience, and as the land and weather changed, climbing became tougher. By the second day, they were climbing steep, icy peaks, hoping to reach the mountain's summit. After several days, exhausted and cold, they reached what they thought was the top. There the men paused. They had imagined this moment for days. On the other side of the summit, they hoped, would be a valley leading down and out of the mountains. But instead of a valley, they saw more of the same snow-covered peaks. They weren't near the end of the mountains, they realized. They were in the middle of them. But all hope wasn't lost. Parado was able to spot 2 low summits about 65 kilometers, 40 miles away that didn't have snow. If they could get there, he rationalized, they would be out of the high Andes. Reaching the 2 peaks would require more days of walking, and they didn't have enough food and drink to sustain them. But Parado had a solution. Vicentin could return to the plane, and he and Canessa would take his supplies. They agreed on the plan, and Canessa and Parado continued their journey. Walking toward the 2 peaks was difficult, but as the 2 men continued their hike, little by little, the landscape began to change. The men discovered a small stream of water. The sun was also warmer, and it stayed lighter for more of the day. Within a few days of walking, the snow had disappeared completely and flowers were everywhere. "This is the valley," Canessa said. "This is the way out." Within days of reaching the valley, the first signs of humanity started to appear. A few cans on the ground, some farm animals in a field. It was December 19th, and they had been walking for 8 days. By December 21st, the exhausted pair made it to the town of Las Maitinas in Chile, and a rescue team was sent to save their 14 fellow survivors who were still high in the Andes. In the end, all of the remaining survivors were saved. The memories of the crash in the Andes would be with the friends forever, but for now, their ordeal was over. They had made it out, alive.
(9b) In Search of the Afghan Girl. She was one of the world's most famous faces, and yet no one knew who she was. Her image appeared on the front of magazines, books, and posters, but she didn't know it. Who was this young girl, and what happened to her? After searching for nearly 2 decades, National Geographic once again found the Afghan girl with the unforgettable green eyes. This is her story. For over 20 years, the young Afghan girl's identity and her fate remained a mystery. After several unsuccessful attempts to locate her, National Geographic photographer Steve McCurry, who had taken her famous photo, returned to Pakistan once more to see if he could uncover any information about the girl. She would now be a woman in her early 30s, and finding her, if she was indeed still alive, would not be easy. McCurry discovered that the refugee camp where he'd taken the original photo was still standing. He began his search there. He showed the girl's photograph to many people. Most did not know the child. And then, a man who had also lived in the camp as a boy recognized the girl's picture. Yes, he told McCurry, she was alive. She had left the camp and was now living in the mountains of Afghanistan. The man offered to find the woman and bring her to McCurry. It seemed a long shot, but McCurry agreed. It took 3 days for the woman to arrive, but when McCurry saw her walk into the room, he was convinced this was the right person. Time and hardship had erased her youth, but the eyes had not changed. They were the same bright color, with the same intense stare. The woman, through an interpreter, was introduced as Sharbat Gula. At last, the girl in the photo had a name and could tell her story. In the winter of 1984, when Gula was just a child, bombs exploded in her village, killing her parents. She, her grandmother, brother, and sisters fled in terror across dangerous mountain roads to Pakistan. Once there, they stayed in various refugee camps along the border of the 2 countries, living in crowded surroundings at the mercy of other people. It was in one of these camps that McCurry met and photographed young Sharbat Gula. Gula had married at the age of 16. In the mid-1990s, during a pause in the fighting in Afghanistan, she and her husband returned home. Once there, however, the couple's life remained difficult and unstable. One of their 4 daughters died as a baby. Following this tragedy, Gula's husband contracted a serious illness, and there were no medical clinics in the region for him to go to. Although he survived the illness, money was scarce, and Gula's husband had to travel to Pakistan for work. His wages were just enough for the family to live on. Though Gula received some schooling as a child, she was unable to complete her studies. Today she can write her name, but cannot read. Nevertheless, she has hopes for the future. "I want my daughters to have skills," she said. "I wanted to finish school, but could not. I was sorry when I had to leave." Gula hopes her girls will get the education she was never able to complete. She had also never seen the photograph taken by McCurry, nor did she know that it had become a famous image and inspired thousands of people worldwide to aid refugees. I don't think she was particularly interested in her personal fame, McCurry said. But Gula was pleased when she learned she had become a symbol of the strength of her people. Today, Sharbat Gula and her story are once again mobilizing people to help. For example, by inspiring people to assist in the development and delivery of educational opportunities for young Afghan women and girls. She stood for an entire group of refugees, not just Afghan refugees, says Boyd Matson of National Geographic. She has helped us with our mission of educating people about other cultures and regions, and she's helping us again by drawing attention to the lives of Afghan women and girls in general.
(10a) What's on your mind? The ancient Egyptians thought so little of the brain that when a king died, they removed the brain from his body and threw it away. The Egyptians presumed, like many people before and after them, that consciousness existed in the heart. Today we know that the mind is a product of the brain. But how exactly does this 1.5 kilo, 3-pound piece of flesh create a mind which allows you to think about yourself, experience happiness and anger, or remember events that happened 20 minutes or 20 years ago? This isn't a new question. Today, however, powerful new techniques for visualizing the sources of thought, emotion, behavior, and memory are transforming the way we understand the brain and the mind it creates. Have you ever stopped and thought, "What's wrong with me today? I just don't feel like myself." Perhaps you were more tired or worried than usual, but somehow you knew that something was different about you. This self-awareness, the ability to think about yourself and how you're feeling, is an important part of being human. This part of your mind has its origins in the prefrontal cortex, a region of your brain just behind your forehead that extends to about your ears. Before this area began to function, around age 2, you didn't understand that you were a separate entity with your own identity. In time, as this part of your brain developed, you then became more aware of yourself and your thoughts and feelings. Perhaps one of the most important factors involved in shaping our identity is memory. The ability to retain and remember facts, faces, and experiences. What exactly is a memory? Most scientists define it as a stored pattern of connections between neurons in the brain. Every feeling you remember, every thought you think, alters the connections within the vast network of brain cells, and memories are reinforced, weakened, or newly formed. Most people's earliest memories reach back to about age 3 or so. Very few people recall anything before this time because the part of the brain that helps form long-term memories, the hippocampus, was not yet mature. This doesn't mean earlier memories don't exist in your mind, though. Some scientists believe highly emotional memories, especially those associated with intense fear, might be stored in another structure in the brain, the amygdala, that may be functional at birth. Though these memories are not accessible to the conscious mind, they might still influence the way we feel and behave, even into adulthood. But where do our emotions come from, and how do they shape the people we are and the way we perceive the world? 40 years ago, psychologist Paul Ekman demonstrated that facial expressions used to exhibit certain emotions are recognized by people everywhere. Ekman suggested that these emotions and their corresponding facial expressions evolved to help us deal quickly with situations that can affect our welfare. Though humans may share certain emotions and recognize them in others, we don't all have the same emotional response to every situation. In fact, most emotional responses are learned and stored in our memories. The smell of freshly cut grass, for example, will generate happy feelings in someone who spent enjoyable childhood summers in the countryside, but not in someone who was forced to work long hours on a farm. Once an emotional association like this is made, it is very difficult to reverse it. Emotion is the least flexible part of the brain, says Ekman, but we can learn to control our emotions by becoming consciously aware of their underlying causes and by not reacting automatically to things in our environment. But is it really possible to control our emotions? Researcher Richard Davidson has demonstrated that people who experience negative emotions display activity in their right prefrontal cortex. In those with a more positive perspective, the activity occurs in the left prefrontal cortex. Could we, Davidson wondered, control this activity and shift our mental state away from negative feelings toward a calmer state of mind? To answer this question, Davidson worked with a group of volunteers in the United States. One group received 8 weeks of training using different meditation and relaxation techniques, while another group did not. By the end of the study, those who had meditated had accomplished their goal. They showed a clear shift in brain activity toward the left, happier frontal cortex. For centuries, people have studied the brain, but it is only in recent years that we have really started to learn how it works. Nevertheless, there is still a long way to go before we understand our mind's many complexities.
(10b) Inside Animal Minds. In 1977, Irene Pepperberg, a recent graduate of Harvard University, did something very unusual. She was interested in learning if animals could think, and the best way to do this, she reasoned, was to talk to them. To test her theory, she bought an African gray parrot she named Alex and taught him to reproduce the sounds of the English language. I thought if he learned to communicate, I could ask him questions about how he sees the world, she explains. When Pepperberg began her research with Alex, very few scientists acknowledged that animals were capable of thought. The belief was that animals reacted to things in their environment, but lacked the ability to think or feel. How then could a scientist demonstrate that animals might, in fact, possess intelligence? That's why I started my studies with Alex, Pepperberg says. Certain skills are considered key signs of higher mental abilities: a good memory, an understanding of symbols, self-awareness, understanding of others' motives, and creativity. Little by little, researchers have documented these abilities in other species. Sheep and elephants can recognize faces. Chimpanzees, who are genetically similar to humans, use a variety of primitive tools for eating, drinking, and hunting. They also laugh when pleased and spit to show disgust with something. Octopuses in captivity are known to amuse themselves by shooting water at laboratory staff. They may even exhibit basic emotions by changing color. Alex the parrot was a surprisingly good talker. He learned how to use his voice to imitate almost 100 English words, including those for foods, colors, shapes, and numbers. Although imitation was once considered a simple skill, in recent years cognitive scientists have revealed that it's extremely difficult. It requires the imitator to form a mental image of the other person's body and actions, and then adjust his own body parts into the same position. It is a behavior that shows an awareness of oneself. Because Alex had mastered many English words, Pepperberg could ask him questions about a bird's basic understanding of the world. Alex could count, as well as describe shapes, colors, and sizes for Pepperberg. He even had a basic understanding of the abstract concept of zero. Many of Alex's cognitive skills, such as his ability to understand the concepts of same and different, are generally attributed only to higher mammals, particularly primates such as humans and apes. But parrots, like great apes and humans, live a long time in complex societies. And like primates, these birds must monitor the changing relationships within the group. This may explain Alex's ability to learn a human language. When we take parrots into captivity, what they start to do is treat us as their flock, explains Pepperberg. Parrots learn to pronounce and use our words so they can become a part of our group. Researchers in Germany and Austria have also been studying language ability in dogs. One, named Betsy, has shown that she is able to learn and remember words as quickly as a 2-year-old child. She has an extraordinary vocabulary of over 340 words, and counting, knows at least 15 people by name, and can link photographs with the real objects they represent. Like Alex, she's pretty smart. This is the larger lesson of animal cognition research. It humbles us. We are not alone in our ability to invent, communicate, demonstrate emotions, or think about ourselves. Still, humans remain the creative species. No other animal has built cities, written music, or made a computer. In fact, a number of critics dismiss animals' ability to use tools or understand human language. They believe animals are just simulating human behavior. Yet, many researchers say that creativity and language in animals, like other forms of intelligence, have evolved. People were surprised to discover that chimpanzees make tools, says Alex Kachelnik, an animal researcher at Oxford University. But people also thought, well, they share our ancestry, of course they're smart. Now we're finding these kinds of behaviors in some species of birds. But we don't have a recently shared ancestry with birds. It means, Kachelnik continues, that evolution can invent similar forms of advanced intelligence more than once, that it's not something reserved only for primates or mammals.
(11a) The power of color. Thinkers, artists, and scientists have long debated the nature of color. What are its origins, and how does it affect us? Early humans watched their fires blacken the ceilings of the caves where they lived. They saw blue and red in the sky, and brown and green on the ground. In time, people began to understand that color not only made the world more beautiful, it was also able to convey emotion and symbolize power. Using colors they extracted from insects, plants, and minerals, primitive humans copied animals, painting their bodies to signal aggression toward an enemy or to attract a mate. Over the centuries, the sources of colors such as blue, purple, and red were carefully guarded and were often worth as much as gold. In the 19th century, a young chemistry student became the first to manufacture a synthetic dye, and suddenly the world became a much more colorful place. By the 20th century, as scientists discovered the psychological effects of colors, everyone from advertisers to educators found ways to make use of color to influence our feelings and behavior. Red. Red, the color of human blood, has traditionally symbolized intensity, fire, love, and anger. In Eastern cultures, it also represents luck, wealth, and success. In humans, the color red can send different messages. Some people redden, for example, when they are angry or embarrassed, sending a clear signal to others about how they are feeling. British anthropologists Russell Hill and Robert Barton of the University of Durham found that when opponents in a game are equally matched, the team dressed in red is more likely to win. Why? According to Barton, red seems to be the color, across species, that signals dominance, giving those dressed in red an advantage in sporting events. In many animal species, including humans, contact with this bold color causes the heart rate to accelerate. However, one of red's lighter shades, pink, can have the opposite effect on people. Men in prisons are reported to be more passive when the walls are painted a specific shade of pink. Humans have also used the color red in everything from politics to advertising. Many food products in the U.S., for example, are packaged in red containers. Why? The color makes the product look as if it is advancing toward a shopper. Yellow. Yellow, the color we most often associate with sunshine, is found throughout nature and the man-made world as a color that commands attention. Indeed, it is one of the easiest colors to see. This highly visible shade is found on everything from school buses to traffic signs and pens used to highlight important information in a text. The color is also used to caution people. Soccer players, for example, are shown yellow as a reminder to behave. It can be used as a stimulant as well. In a number of studies, yellow has been found to help children focus on their work and do better in school. Blue. Blue, the color of sky and sea, has long been associated in many cultures with water, holy or religious objects, and protection against evil. Over the years, darker shades of the color have also come to represent calm, stability, and power. Dark blue, for example, is the color of the business suit or police uniform. It tells others, "I am in control," or "You can trust me." In other cultures, blue has been associated with sadness. It's common in English, for example, when feeling sad or depressed, to talk about feeling blue, while in Iran, blue is the color of mourning, worn when a person dies. Like pink, blue has a neutral, calming effect on people. Rooms painted blue help people to relax or sleep. Sleeping pills are often colored blue to suggest exactly this idea. The color also seems to inhibit hunger. Blue food is rarely seen in nature, and when it is, such food is usually no longer healthy to consume, with the exception of certain fruits like blueberries. Thus, eating off blue plates may reduce one's hunger. So if you're planning to lose weight, try adding a blue light to your refrigerator. It will make the food inside look less appetizing. It's just one more example of the power that color can hold over us.
(11b) Van Gogh's World. Starry nights and sunflowers, self-portraits and cafe settings, all painted in bold, intense colors. Today, people around the world immediately recognize these as the work of Vincent van Gogh, the Dutch painter. Probably no other artist at any time in any culture has achieved such popularity. But who was this man exactly, and why even today do his art and life have such an ability to move us? An artist is born. Vincent van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853, in a small village in southern Holland. As a child, he was serious and sensitive. He loved to draw, and his work showed talent, but no one encouraged him to become an artist. Instead, his father thought he should take a sensible job, something like a sales clerk or carpenter. As a young adult, he wandered from job to job with little success and very little money, becoming more depressed with each failure. In March 1880, however, just before his 27th birthday, something changed inside Van Gogh. He realized that he was meant to be a painter, and he began to study art, receiving a subsidy from his brother Theo, which helped him to live. Discovering color. In 1886, Van Gogh moved from Holland to Paris, hoping to learn more about color techniques being used by Impressionist artists there. Instead of grays and browns, his work began to emphasize blue and red, and then yellow and orange. Soon he began to see life differently. Go slow, stop thinking, look around. You'll see something beautiful if you open yourself. These were the principles that guided his art. With his innovative color combinations, Van Gogh wanted to show his viewers how to better appreciate a flower, the night sky, or a person's face. Descent into madness. Few who lived in Van Gogh's time appreciated his work, however. Many laughed when they saw his paintings, which hurt the sensitive artist terribly. In February 1888, he moved away from Paris to Arles, a town in southern France. Often he could not eat or sleep and stayed up into the early morning hours painting. Days passed, and he spoke to no one. Following an argument with fellow artist Paul Gauguin, Van Gogh took a razor and cut off his own earlobe. He never explained why, but by now many were convinced that Van Gogh was crazy, and indeed his mental health started to decline. He began to have attacks during which he would hear strange sounds and think people were trying to hurt him. In the spring of 1889, he was sent to a mental hospital in Saint-Rémy, a town near Arles. What exactly was Van Gogh suffering from? No one knows for sure, but some now think it may have been a form of manic depression. Whatever his condition, Van Gogh's illness both inhibited and inspired his creativity. When his attacks came, he could not paint. But during his periods of calm, he was able to complete more than 100 masterpieces, including the classic Starry Night. "Working on my pictures," he wrote, "is almost a necessity for my recovery." Final days. Following his release from hospital in May 1890, Van Gogh took a room in a town just north of Paris. For the 70 days that he lived there, he produced, on average, a painting a day. Until his death, however, he was unable to sell a single one. Today, those paintings would be worth more than $1 billion. It was at this time that Van Gogh either borrowed or stole a gun. On the afternoon of July 27, 1890, he went out to the country and shot himself in the stomach. 2 days later, Vincent van Gogh died at age 37. What caused him to take his own life? His lack of financial success? Mental illness? His loneliness? The question, like so many others in Van Gogh's life, remains unanswered. Van Gogh's legacy. Over a century after his death, Van Gogh still remains extremely popular. His story of a man who resisted materialism and greed, who was alone and unappreciated, gives people something they need. We find pieces of ourselves in him. This may also explain the high prices paid for Van Gogh's work. His portrait of Dr. Gachet sold in 1990 for more than $80 million to a Japanese businessman, breaking the world record for art pieces. Many of his other works have also sold for millions. Of course, people are buying great art when they purchase one of Van Gogh's paintings. But they are also buying a piece of his story, which, like his work, will live on forever.
"12A. A Cure for Cancer?" In the 1966 science fiction film, The Fantastic Voyage, a team of scientists and doctors are shrunk to microscopic size and injected into the body of an injured man to save his life. The tiny crew travels through the body's dangerous environment to locate and repair the damaged part of the man's body. Eventually, the group manages to complete their task and the man awakens fully cured. Such an idea, while fun, sounds extraordinary to many. But what if it were possible to cure a disease like cancer using tiny particles injected into a person? Particles that would not only find the cancer, but also destroy it without harming anything else in the body. Although it may seem like science fiction, tools like this are now being developed and may in fact become common in the near future, thanks to research currently being done in the field of nanotechnology. The main thing to know about nanotechnology is that it's small, really small. The prefix nano refers to a nanometer, which is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. How small is that exactly? A comma on a page of a book or magazine, for instance, may be more than 500,000 nanometers wide. Understanding the science of small may eventually allow doctors to diagnose and cure illnesses like heart disease and cancer early, before they can do extensive damage to the body. Researcher Ted Sargent, a leader in the field of nanotechnology, describes how using quantum dots, particles that are a few nanometers in size, will help diagnose disease. The particles, Sargent explains, shine brightly when exposed to UV light. These particles can be inserted into the body and programmed to bond only to a certain type of cell, a particular cancer cell, for example. Doctors can then use a camera and look for the colored particles, which will help them determine where cancer cells are growing in a person's body. Using this technology, it will be possible to detect cancer at a stage when there are perhaps only 1,000 bad cells. Compare this to what happens today. Doctors can diagnose cancer only after the dangerous cells have multiplied into the millions and developed into a tumor. One of the advantages of detecting and treating cancer at an early stage is that the cells are less likely to become resistant to drug treatment. In later stages, cancer cells often change and adapt to certain drugs so rapidly that many medicines become ineffective. Once a certain type of cancer is detected, nanotechnology will also radically improve the way it is treated. Right now, most cancer treatments kill not only the cancerous cells, but the healthy ones as well, causing a number of side effects in people, such as hair loss, nausea, and intense pain. Nanoparticles, on the other hand, will allow doctors to attack cancerous tumors without disturbing healthy cells. The goal will be to deliver cancer-killing drugs, carried via the nanoparticles to the bad cells only. A second method will be to destroy cancer cells, identified by nanoparticles, using laser rays. Ultimately, technologies like this will allow doctors to deliver cancer treatment earlier, faster, and more thoroughly with fewer side effects. Unfortunately, even though nanoparticles have great medical potential, there are serious concerns that these same materials could have negative environmental and health effects. In recent studies, fish exposed to water containing large amounts of nanoparticles suffered brain damage, and people are at risk as well. After exposing lab-grown human cells to water containing large amounts of nanoparticles, researchers found that half the human cells died. Because nanotechnology is so potentially useful, many scientists don't think research into its many uses should be stopped. Learning more about nanotechnology should remain a priority. But scientists do believe that government should allocate more money for safety-related studies to make sure that large concentrations of nanoparticles do not get into our food and water supplies and cause serious problems. Meanwhile, research into the uses of nanotechnology in health and many other fields continues. What's amazing is how quickly this is evolving, says chemist Vicky Colvin. Even 10 years ago, a lot of these applications would have seemed pretty unrealistic. Perhaps that old movie, The Fantastic Voyage, isn't so hard to believe after all.
(12b) Deadly contact. In September 1994, a violent disease erupted among a group of racehorses in a small town in Australia. The first victim was a female horse who was last seen eating grass beneath a fruit tree. One of her caretakers noticed that the horse didn't appear to be well and brought the animal back to her stable for observation. Within hours, the horse's health declined rapidly. 3 people worked to save the animal: the horse's trainer, an assistant, and a veterinarian. Nevertheless, the horse died 2 days later, leaving the cause of her death uncertain. Had she been bitten by a snake or eaten something poisonous? Within 2 weeks, most of the other horses in the stable became ill as well. All had high fevers, difficulty breathing, facial swelling, and blood coming from their noses and mouths. Despite efforts by the veterinarian, 12 more animals died. Meanwhile, the trainer and his assistant also became ill, and within days the trainer was dead too. Laboratory analysis finally discovered the root of the problem. The horses and men had been infected by a previously unknown virus, which doctors eventually labeled Hendra. This virus had originated in bats that lived in the tree where the first horse had been eating grass. The virus passed from the bats to the horse, which then transmitted the virus to other horses and to people, with disastrous results. Infectious disease is all around us. Disease-causing agents, such as viruses, usually have specific targets. Some viruses only affect humans. Other viruses live in or affect only animals. Problems start when animal viruses are able to infect people as well, a process known as zoonosis. When an animal virus passes to a human, the results can be deadly. Often our immune systems are not accustomed to these viruses and are unable to stop them before they harm us. In the last 3 decades, more than 30 zoonotic diseases, the kind that live only in animals but somehow pass to people, have emerged around the globe. HIV is an example. It evolved from a virus originally carried by African monkeys and later chimps. Today, conservative estimates suggest that HIV has infected more than 40 million people, though this number may be higher. SARS, a type of flu which jumped from chickens to humans, is another type of zoonotic disease. But how do these viruses, like Hendra, SARS, and HIV, pass from animals to humans? Contact is crucial. Human destruction of animal habitats, for example, is forcing wild animals to move closer to the places people live, putting humans at risk for exposure to animal viruses. The closer humans are to animals, the greater the risk of being bitten, scratched, or exposed to animal waste, which can enable a virus to pass from an animal to a human. Raising animals, for example on a farm, or keeping certain kinds of wild animals, like monkeys, as pets, increases the risk of exposure. Eating animals that are diseased can also result in a virus being transmitted. The factor that is probably most responsible for the spread of zoonotic diseases worldwide is international travel. In 1999, for example, a deadly disease, one that had never been seen before in the Western Hemisphere, appeared in the United States. There were several incidences that year of both birds and people becoming sick and dying in New York City, and doctors couldn't explain why. Subsequently, they discovered that the deaths had been caused by the same thing, the West Nile virus, found typically in birds and transmitted by mosquitoes that live in parts of northern Africa. Somehow, this virus, probably carried by an infected mosquito or bird on a plane or ship, arrived in the U.S. Now, birds and mosquitoes native to North America are carriers of this virus as well. West Nile cannot be transmitted from person to person, but zoonotic diseases, which can be spread by a handshake or sneeze, create medical emergencies. They can potentially circle the world and kill millions of people before science can find a way to control them. Today, researchers are working to create vaccines for many of these zoonotic diseases in the hope of controlling their impact on humans. Other specialists are trying to make communities more aware of disease prevention and treatment, and to help people understand that we are all, humans, animals, and insects, in this together.